Previously on Sodor, the early years.
He hadn't been aware that the Fat Controller would be on his train. "Well, I hope you and your family enjoy the concert, sir." "Thank you." A worried frown crossed Sir Topham's face. "It sounds like they may be snowed in. Do you think you could get to Kirk Ronan in this weather, Eric?" "I'll do what I can, Sir Topham." Eric backed down onto his train a few minutes later, with the snowplow firmly attached to his buffers. Once Sir Topham had climbed into his cab, Eric whistled and set off into the storm. Despite his determination, Eric couldn't help feeling nervous as he headed down the line. He'd never seen snow this heavy, and was afraid they wouldn't be able to make it through. But he forged ahead, his snowplow shoving aside the snow that had built up over the track. They soon reached Rolf's castle. Sir Topham climbed down from Eric's cab, and had a few quick words with the station master before turning to Eric. "The road to Kirk Ronan is blocked by snow," he said. A worried look crossed Eric's face. "We'd better leave the coaches here, until we're sure the line is clear." "If you say so, sir," Eric replied. His driver quickly uncoupled the coaches, and Sir Topham climbed back into his cab. "We'd better take this carefully," he said, as the large tank engine moved off. They didn't encounter any problems until they reached the bridge just before Kirk Ronan. Through the swirling snowfall, Eric caught sight of the cutting ahead. "Driver, stop!" Eric's driver quickly applied the brakes. Eric stopped, just short of the wall of snow blocking the line. His driver and Sir Topham climbed down from his cab. "There's a bit of ice mixed in there with the snow. We'll need some way to melt it," Sir Topham observed. "If we had some salt," Eric's driver said. "Excuse me, sir, but couldn't you use some of the cinders from my firebox?" Sir Topham looked thoughtfully at Eric. "Cinders and ashes," he said. "That's a good idea, Eric. Along with some hot coals, that should be enough to soften the snow for you to break through it." Eric grinned. While this had been going on, the concert-goers had sought shelter in Kirk Ronan's various cafes and bars. About half an hour after Eric had reached the snowdrift, the mayor of Kirk Ronan was talking to the Fat Controller. "Is there any chance one of your engines could get through, Mr. Hat? We can't leave the visitors stranded here." The Fat Controller smiled grimly. "Even if they could, we can't. I've tried calling Kelsthorpe Road from 3 different cafes. I'm afraid there's also a standing order to hold all trains in this sort of weather. Aside from emergencies, that is. But if they don't know it's an emergency..." The mayor broke off as a whistle drifted through the air. "Did you hear that?" "Yes, it sounded like Eric." The whistle came again, and a moment later the owner of the Beach Street Cafe stepped out onto the footpath. "Excuse me, Mr. At," he began, "but I've got your father on the phone for you. He's calling from the railway station." A grin crossed the Fat Controller's face. "As I recall, Eric had 5 coaches. That should be enough for all of the visitors, however it will be a bit of a squeeze." "I'll see if I can arrange some buses," replied the mayor. A few minutes later, Eric had turned around and backed down onto his train for the return journey. "Any sign of them, sir?" he asked. "Not yet, I'm afraid," replied Sir Topham. A moment later, the sound of a bus horn cut through the air. A convoy of buses arrived. A crowd of passengers disembarked from them a moment later, and they lined up to get into the train. They were eager to get out of the cold snowstorm. The Fat Controller made sure his family was safely aboard, then went to talk to Eric. "Don't worry about it, Stephen," said Sir Topham. "I'll look after this one. You'd better look after Helen and the kids." The Fat Controller smiled. "Thanks, Dad," he said appreciatively. He climbed into the coach. Sir Topham went to rejoin Eric when a voice stopped him.
"Grandpa,
Sir Topham stepped over to the coach. "Yes, Emily?"
was that engine brave?"
Emily asked from the coach. "Yes, he was, Emily. Very brave indeed," Sir Topham replied. A moment later, the guard's whistle rang out. Sir Topham quickly climbed aboard the coach. A few moments later, Eric set out on his return journey. By the time he reached Kelsthorpe Road, the snowstorm had died down. Eric smoothly brought his train into the station, and the grateful passengers disembarked. Henry, who was still waiting with the flying kipper, glanced over from the main line. "I see you made it through. Well done, Eric." "Yes, very well done indeed," Sir Topham added. "You're a really useful engine, Eric. I would have been proud to have you on the railway in my day." "Thank you, sir," Eric replied modestly. Coming from Sir Charles Topham Hatt, those words meant quite a lot. "I told Stephen all that you did, too," Sir Topham said. A moment later, Eric's face fell as another thought struck him. He'd overheard what the former Fat Controller had said to his granddaughter. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly, "but I didn't really feel that brave when we were trying to reach Kirk Ronan. In fact, I was quite scared." Sir Topham chuckled. "Bravery isn't about being fearless, Eric. It's about conquering that fear." "I see," Eric said, as the station master gave Henry clearance to move off. Eric grinned a moment later. He had been brave, he realized, and now he knew what it meant to be a really useful engine.